Hi, this is Dave Castle here with the third in a series of videos about using Roxy to manage MarkLogic applications. In this video, we're going to look at the Roxy files that control the configuration of a MarkLogic application. Before doing this video, you should have created a Roxy hybrid application, as I showed you how to do in the second video in the series. When you create a new application with Roxy, it creates a deploy directory. And in this directory, we've got a couple of properties files and this mlconfig.xml. That's what we'll be talking about in this video. So in this deploy directory, we see that there's the build.properties, default.properties, and mlconfig.xml. You might also see in some projects, you'll see a local.properties or a dev.properties. Those are environment-specific properties files, and we'll see those shortly. So let's take a look at what we have. Starting with the default.properties file, we can see right off the top it says do not edit. So the idea of this file is it provides a number of properties that Roxy needs to have defined, but the intention is you're not going to edit this file. Instead, you would copy any properties you need and put them in a different properties file. The reason for that is that when you upgrade Roxy, this file will get overwritten, and so any changes that you put in here would get lost. So next is the build.properties file, and this is kind of the general properties configuration for your application. So this is where we're going to put most properties, and we'll have the values here that are appropriate for most of your environments. And then from there we can also have some environment-specific properties files. Let's take a look at how we see what Roxy knows about an environment. If we run mlinfo-h, that gives us a little information about this command, and one of the things it mentions is that you should provide an environment to look at it. Let's take a look at the local environment. So here we have all the properties that it knows about as set up for that particular environment. All right, let's start playing with these properties now and see if we can do some different things. One of the properties that's defined in the default.properties file is this content forest per host. This is a simple way to configure your application to have multiple forests on each server that supports a database in a particular cluster. So for a small example, when I'm running on my local host, it's just an isolated machine. That's one host. But maybe my production server has 3 hosts in it, or 20 hosts, or whatever. The content forest per host will set the number of forests that are going to be on each and every one of the servers in that environment. Now I don't want to add it in my default.properties file, so instead I'm copying that and going back to build.properties. And here, let's suppose that I decide 4 is a good number of forests for most of my environments. Now, if I do mlinfo again, this time I'm going to grep for forest to get that particular property. You'll notice that by putting it into build.properties, I've overridden the value in default.properties. So build always overrides default. Now, 4 forests seems to me like overkill for my little laptop. So I'm going to set up an environment-specific file. And here I'm going to go with the value 1, which is, I think, sufficient for there. And let's also set up a dev environment. And let's suppose that I want 2 forests there. So my local environment is just going to have the 1 forest. My dev environment is going to have 2 because I specified that. My prod environment, production, which I have not set up a file for, is going to have 4 because that's the default value provided in build.properties. Some other things I might want to do in here are set the ports. So maybe I've figured out that these ports are available on my dev machine. And these are properties that I'm getting directly from the build.properties file here. All the way at the bottom of the build.properties file, we also have properties to specify what servers each of the environments uses. I tend to actually put that in the environment-specific file itself. So let's suppose that's my dev server. So when you think about where you want to put a property, the thing to ask is, am I setting a property that's going to be pretty consistent over all my environments, in which case it goes in build.properties, or am I overriding that application-wide value for a particular environment? And your environment-specific files should really have only those properties needed to change from the build.properties file. So by default, Roxy recognizes local, dev, and prod as environments. But you might want to introduce another one. Let's do that. So in default.properties, there's a property down here that specifies which environments Roxy will recognize. So I'm going to go back to build.properties, copying it, pasting it in here, and maybe we've got an integration environment. So at this point, I can now use that as an environment when I'm running my commands. One last point to make about properties files before we move on. You can picture yourself in a team of developers where you've each got your own local machine that you're working on, and then you've got a shared development environment and a production environment. With that kind of a situation, naturally you want the properties files for dev and prod to be shared among everyone. But the local.properties file, there's a good chance it's going to be different for everyone on your team. So here's what we can do. We've changed our build properties file, and we've added a dev and a prod. So we can commit those. Now we just have this local.properties file. Now if we leave it as is, it's easy for it to get accidentally checked in. And if it does get accidentally checked in, then somebody else is going to do a pull, and maybe their environment gets a little bit messed up. So here's what we can do. In the base of our project, we can create a new file called getignore. And in there we can add our local.properties file. You'll notice here that Git is no longer showing the local.properties file. It's just showing this .getignore. So we'll add that. And now you can see we've got a nice clean status, and I don't have to worry about accidentally checking in that local properties file, and also I don't have to worry about anybody else checking it in, so mine will be nice and safe. Properties files have control over some aspects of the application. But other aspects, such as database settings and indexes, users, and roles, are controlled by a different file. That's controlled by the mlconfig.xml. Now, this file might look familiar to you if you've ever taken a look at the databases.xml file that MarkLogic uses to store its properties, its settings. A key difference is the use of properties in here. So for instance, this HTTP server name is going to be replaced by the app name property as defined for the particular environment. So in this case, our app name is test app. We have not changed that in any of the environments. So the app will always be called test app. The app server will always be called app name. Likewise, the ports will be set for each individual environment. Scrolling farther down, we can see a section for the content database. A little bit farther down, we have sections for fragment roots and fields and indexes. But up here, we can take a look at a couple of the settings. Now, these are settings that we wanted to change from the defaults that MarkLogic provides, or just ones that we often want to make changes to. If we want to specify additional settings, then I'm going to show you how to do that. Now, before we open up this file, I want to make an important point. This file, databases.xml, is used by MarkLogic to actually keep track of the current databases and what their settings ought to be. It's really important that we do not edit this file. I'm only opening it up to take a look at it. Okay, so here we are looking at the databases section, and this is the documents database. And if we pick some particular value, let's say, let's take a look at the reindexer. Suppose that we wanted to be able to turn this on or off depending on the environment. First thing I'm going to do is copy that value, and here in my content database, I'm going to paste that in. So right now it's still got the default value of true. I could give this a default value of false, so that for this application's content database, regardless of the environment, this will always be set to false, and then you can handle reindexing manually. What's more interesting is, let's suppose that I do this. I'll copy that name. Let's say we probably want it true most of the time, but maybe we don't want this to happen in production. So how do I get that to come into here? Instead of specifying an exact value like that, the @ml dot tells the Roxy deployer as it's going through this file to make a substitution. And it's going to take a look at whatever follows that and see if it's got a property that matches. In this case, we set up that property in build.properties and in prod with different values. So when we bootstrap this to my local environment, the reindexer will be on, but when I bootstrap it to the production environment, it'll be turned off. Okay, with that, I'm just going to take a quick peek down here, a little farther down, to show you some of the indexing settings, and then farther down still, we get to roles, users, amps, and privileges. And all those things, the indexes and those security values, will be dealt with in a future video. All right, thanks for watching.